Welcome to the Estate Planning Podcast. I'm Bill Gross at Bill Gross Probate on social media. We do this every week to meet leaders in the field of estate planning across the country, attorneys and vendors and other participants in the process. I'm a real estate broker in Los Angeles, California that works with attorneys and vendors across the country. Really excited to have today a friend of ours who's been on our other podcast. We have Probate Weekly. He's been a couple times. But now to talk about estate planning with us is Jamy Barreau from Florida. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
And if I remember last time I had the wrong part of Florida, I used to live in Florida in the southeast part in Palm Beach County. You're in Port St. Lucie, correct?
Correct. Port St. Lucie, about 45 minutes north of West Palm.
Very nice. And are you native there, or how'd you end up in Port St. Lucie, Florida?
I am a Port St. Lucie native, proud graduate of St. Lucie West Centennial High School.
Wow.
Yeah, and so ended up leaving Port St. Lucie to go to school, of course. I went up to UCF for undergrad and then Barry Law for law school. But after law school, I said, wow, I really miss home. And I was lucky enough to land a position at a firm back home, and I've been here ever since.
How'd you end up you said you got a position with the firm. How'd you end up specifically in estate planning?
Well, I was lucky enough, the firm I started out with had, a wide range of practice areas. And the bulk of what I got to handle was commercial litigation, contract drafting, negotiation, probate administration, and estate planning. And so I got a taste of a lot of different things. But really, the estate planning side of things really stood out to me the most. So I kind of latched on to that and held on to it for the rest of my career until today, really.
And so, if you were to kind of paint a picture or draw an icon of the most common kind of client that you work with today, and then maybe aspirationally what you're trying to move towards, if there's a difference, what would be the most common client you're working with today, and maybe what are you looking to move into over the long run?
Well, it's interesting because I had wholeheartedly expected to work with a majority elderly clients here in Port St. Lucie. But it's interesting because it seems like my firm has attracted a lot of folks near my age. So I'd say that the majority of my clients, the bulk of them, are typically on the younger side, starting off their families, starting off their businesses. And what they really want to do is make sure they protect their legacy to pass on to the next generation as smoothly as possible. Now, as the firm grows, I'm hoping to pull in more high net worth clients and kind of lean into them in addition to the clients I have now. But that would be a little snapshot of the clients that we have here at the firm.
When people call you initially to engage you, either asking questions, solving sort of a problem, or to actually hire you to handle them with their estate planning, what's the most common problem they're looking to solve, or the most common question they have that they need help with?
Well, so a lot of the folks that call, they get a lot of concerns about avoiding the probate process, right? They had some family members that went through probate, or they heard tell of this whole process and how expensive it could be. And so really that's typically what their main goal is, right? They want to establish a trust or establish a ladybird deed to make sure that assets can pass to their heirs as smoothly as possible. And I have noticed an uptick of folks in the recent months who not just want things to go smoothly to the people they want, but they also want to disinherit someone. I'm not sure if it's
Mm.
because we're coming off of the holidays or something like that, but
Some
but
bad
I'm
Thanksgiving
seeing
dinners, it sounds like.
exactly. I'm seeing an uptick of people who want to disinherit their family members in
Yeah.
particular. So it's been an interesting few months.
What are some of the particulars? I know California, because I'm based in California. I'm somewhat familiar with Florida. I think there's some similarities, and the principles are certainly the same. But what are some of the dangers or concerns when somebody wants to disinherit a family member with a will, as opposed to a more formal estate plan? What are some of the potential problems, and what are some of the solutions to make that decision or choice effective?
Well, what comes to mind is whether you want to put folks on notice, right? And so with a will here in Florida, at least, um, a will has to go through the probate process, right? So that opens it up to being a public, on the public forum, for folks to be able to witness and see. Whereas if folks kept everything in a trust, for instance, and had that as the driving force of their estate plan, in that case, they're not gonna see that public forum, right? A trust is meant to be private, unless, of course, here in Florida, unless it's going to be challenged in court, then that'll open it up to the public forum, so to speak. Um, so I think that would be an important way that we can make sure that your plan is not only captured and followed, but we can keep it out of the public eye. And if your trust, so for instance, if your trust is being administered privately, that leaves less opportunity for those who were disinherited to come and start making a fuss, so to speak.
I think that's the number one misconception, certainly in California, and I think as is true in Florida as well, is so many people think that a will avoid probate, but the truth is the will is executed in probate. It's either you have a probate with a will or without a will, but a will doesn't excuse you. Now, in some states it does, or some transactions it does, but in California it doesn't at all, and it sounds like in Florida neither. So, important distinction if you want to disinherit somebody and you want to keep a private, perhaps a better option is estate planning. But also, aren't there some strategies as far as completely disinheriting versus giving them a limited amount of money? At least in California, I think there's such a concept that in a trust, certain family members would be normally entitled to certain inheritance, but to write them out entirely then raises the standard of proof versus, say, if you give them $1,000, they get something out of it. Or is there such a concept in Florida as well?
I wouldn't say necessarily, right? There is a strategy out there, a couple of strategies where it comes to disinheritance, right? And one of those is basically saying, hey, this person, I'm including them in the will, but or the plan rather, and all they're getting is a dollar or $1,000, something small in comparison to the rest of the estate. And then another school of thought basically says, hey, this person, I acknowledge their existence, but I'm making it clear that they're not provided for under this plan. And the path you go really depends on a number of factors. I tend to fall into the camp of full disinheritance if that's the true wish of the client. That way, we keep things straightforward, without the least amount of ambiguity as possible. That's what makes me happy at the end of the day.
So some quick housekeeping. We'll take a quick pause here. Really fortunate today to have our guest, Jamy Barreau, Barreau Legal. It's BLEGALFL, so it's BLegalFL for Florida.com. And on there you have a phone number, toll-free number, contact us button, all the information as well. And also Jamie's available on LinkedIn, pretty robust profile and active member there as well. This podcast is the Estate Planning Podcast. I'm Bill Gross, and we issue new episodes every week. We also have a Facebook group. Love to have you come in there and ask questions, post your estate planning related content there as well if you want to market yourself. Love to offer that challenge. Jimmy, when I look at your website, one of the things I always tell people is when you're hiring an attorney, you want to see they're a specialist in the field that you're in, even though the state of Florida or California, well, like in my case, California gives me a license to sell anything that's real estate related in California. I can sell houses, land, industrial buildings. I can sell the Golden Gate Bridge if it's for sale. Doesn't mean I know what I'm doing in those other areas. And when I go on an attorney's website like yours, I see right away when I look at practice areas, this is what I recommend people to do, and scroll down, what is it? I don't want to see drunk driving and incorporation. There is some overlap, certain areas. I know family law and probate kind of has some, or estate planning has some overlap. But generally, we have estate planning and probate administration, which is, to me, staying out of probate. And unfortunately, we're stuck in probate. Other ways to look at that. And then what I would call related niches that are important as well. And so for those watching, that this is the kind of website we look for when we make referrals of our clients or when we're looking for a proper attorney to hire for these areas. Let's talk a little bit then about some of these niches that go within the state plan, meaning I could come to you and spend money and we write this great plan, but at the end of the day, the plan's only effective if we administer it, we execute the game plan properly. And I think that's trust administration. Talk a little bit about trust administration strategies that you have for your clients.
Well, typically, when folks come to me for trust administration, it's after the person who created the trust has passed away, and now it's time to divvy up those assets and loosen, or rather, tighten up the estate, and so on and so forth. And so, although in the state of Florida, there's no requirement that you have an attorney help you administer an estate, but it truly is a good idea, right? There's different deadlines and requirements. You have notice requirements to the beneficiaries. There are tax return requirements to make sure that the decedent's final tax return is taken care of. And making sure to retitle assets and help you collect the assets that were owned by the trust or even still owned in the name of the decedent themselves. And so all of this is a time consuming process. And it's best to have someone who's gone through that process before helping guide you through it so that you can make sure to dot all I's, cross all T's.
I also find that now in California, I've been a fiduciary for certain clients, and I also work with attorneys like you who do trust administration. And one thing I find is there are certain kind of common vendors you need from time to time that when you've done it a few times, you have those already in your Rolodex. When you're trying to find for the first time ever a clean out company, an estate sale company, different specialists, it's work. You're getting paid, true, but it's work versus like any professional who's good at this has good vendors who know who they are, who give them better service, maybe better rates or better results as a result. So that's why trust administration is a big component. Let's talk a little bit about Medicaid planning. Now I'm in California. We have, in the United States, we have two types of federal programs for medical care. We have Medicare, which everybody gets really automatically now when you're 65. When I was 65, I had good private insurance, but at 65, the company could not write me because I had to go onto the United States Medicare program, which, by the way, actually is very generous. I have to say I pay less and get as good benefits as my private medical care. Medicaid is the means tested, which means generally low income. In California, it's called Medi-Cal. That's really what Medicaid is in the state of California, is Medi-Cal. So in Florida, Medicaid, can you talk a little bit about Medicaid planning as a component of an estate plan?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, just to echo of what you were saying, right? Medicaid is needs based, right? So typically, the threshold before you can qualify is you have to have a certain amount of assets, or rather, you can't have more than a certain amount of assets, and you can't have a certain amount of income coming in, right? And so, and all of this is generally provided by the federal law, right? And what federal law says is, that you are able to still qualify for Medicaid if you shift your assets a certain way, right? And how you shift those assets are also provided for it under federal law. And so essentially, there are different estate planning strategies that we can use to help people qualify for Medicaid, right? So let's say you make too much income per month to qualify. Well, there's a special type of trust that we can use to kind of filter out the excess income so that now you can still qualify and there could be some sort of benefit on the back end with that extra income as well. And also, for instance, if your assets are too high or too many assets, right, we can create another type of special kind of trust to shelter those from being counted towards your limits to qualify for Medicaid, right? And now this is all done under the purview of federal law, under purview of Florida law, and all of this is disclosed to the Medicaid office, of course. But it's just a way that we can make sure that our clients can qualify for these important benefits.
And sometimes the benefits that you might not need but become extraordinarily expensive, like end of life care and things like that. And when I first heard about it, I often thought it seemed unfair or somehow dishonest But as just to emphasize what Jimmy said, you're talking about this is complying with the law. This is disclosing according to the law. This is playing by the rules of the law. And frankly, most of us with money are the ones who pay the taxes to begin with. And so to feel that as long as we follow proper legal procedures and do it in an honest, ethical way, this is how the law was written for us to have the benefit of these services that we've paid for through taxes over our life. And I think there's a lot of, the lack of planning, can be a very expensive decision. I think that I'd rather have the opportunity to get those benefits and maybe turn them down if you don't need them versus not plan and realize you have like life-changing financial decisions that you may not like.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the VA planning as a piece of estate planning. Now, I'm not a vet, but we are very vet friendly. My wife's father was a retired military, and one of my partners in crime is retired from the naval service, and so we really want to help where we can. Talk a little bit about how proper planning allows veterans to maximize the benefits they've earned while serving our country.
Well, I think about it in a similar vein to the Medicaid planning, right? There are certain things that we can do to make sure that your assets are organized in such way that you can take advantage of whatever military benefits you might be coming your way. And so what I typically tell folks is, let's have a look at what your assets look like, and let's have a look at, what benefits you might be able to take advantage of, and how can we make sure that you're poised in the proper position to take advantage of those.
Yeah, same thing, I think. And then lastly, special needs planning, of course, is a wide variety, but it seems that this is becoming an explosive growth area. I know here in California, the number of children who have these needs, I think relying on government programs is increasingly challenging. And I think the tax laws and the planning laws have become more appropriate to allow families to make these kinds of plans. I know one of my best friends is a special needs attorney here in Los Angeles, and they've found a way to invest into like a living facility that's like the first floor is commercial, retail for anybody, and then the living above is just for special needs. So it's amazing what people are able to do. Talk a little bit about special needs planning. What are some of the kind of common use cases that come up in the process?
Well, probably the most common that I see is where my clients have a loved one, whether that be their child or a family member or a friend, that they want to benefit from their estate plan. But the concern is that any inheritance is going to throw off whatever benefits they get in terms of as related to their special needs. And so what we can do in the estate planning world is create, for instance, a supplemental needs trust right here in Florida. And what that trust will do is it'll make sure to essentially legally keep that inheritance separate from that third party, that special needs individual, so that they can reap the benefits as a supplement to their benefits that they're receiving from the government. So, a lot of ways that we do that, like I mentioned, having that supplemental needs trust. But what the benefit of that is, right? Let's say the parent set that up for their child. Well, now they can go and tell their family members and friends, like, hey, if you want to leave a gift or inheritance to our child, please just direct that to, we've already set up a supplemental needs trust, just direct it there. And now we can further safeguard any benefits that child may get in the future.
So two of the kind of customer service questions I always ask, which to me are the basics of blocking and tackling in your business on estate plans. Maybe they're because I get involved in these areas the most as a real estate agent. Number one is the funding of the trust. I don't know the exact stats. I want to say I heard trustandwills.com only 20% of their plans ever get funded. And I think nationally there's a number that's similar, like only 30% get funded, 70% never get funded, meaning it's like buying a safe deposit box and you'll put your assets into the box and you wonder why your house gets robbed and you lose everything. Talk a little bit about the importance of funding the plan, and then what, if anything, do you do to help maybe follow up with customers and make sure they effectuate the plan that you help them put together?
Yes, yes. So, you hit the nail on the head, right? So, what I typically tell the clients is, hey, you came to me for a trust. We built you out this amazing trust-based estate plan, but now we have to fund it, right? And it's simply because a trust can only control what it owns, right? So, I think of it this way. You came to me, the trust, I built you a car, but now it's time for you to put the gas in that car, right? Without the gas, you're not going anywhere. And so I do provide guidance to my clients when it comes to funding the trust, but now, there are certain federal rules, regulations, what have you, that make it a little difficult for attorneys to specifically go in and make the necessary funding changes, right? I can only do it up to a certain limit. So I definitely give the clients guidance as much as I can on how to fund those trusts. And also with any real estate, we handle in-house transferring real estate to that trust through a deed. Um,
That's a big one.
so
I can't tell you how many trusts I've seen where the customer pulls out the fancy notebook with all the trust documents, and there's the grant deed the attorney prepared for them and gave to them, and just sitting there like, well, I understand. Is this a copy? Well, no, this is what he gave me. Well, it's good that you have it, but it doesn't really do the job unless you record it at some point in time. So yeah, that's a common problem we have in California. Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's just such a
no.
common mistake that we deal with all the
Mhm.
time, and that you do that in house. And many attorneys don't. And I think that's one of the distinctions. One of the things that attracted me to you right away was, you know, I imagine not all customers want you to, right? But you offer that service. Many attorneys don't. I think that's an important distinction that often gets overlooked by customers. Is the job isn't done until it's done, and you got to get, in particular, the real estate recorded and documented in recording. And I also urge people, particularly now, make sure you get your insurance with the additional insured in the name of the trust. Some companies charge $30 fee to do that, some do it for free. It eliminates just one question from the insurance company or one potential avenue of defense. But I think it's really important to do. And for the realtors on the call, this is your chance to be of service to customers. If you know they did a plan, go online, it's public record, and check and see if they actually did record it. If they do, give your customer a copy of the recorded deed. They would appreciate that. Or give it to the attorney and let them give it to the customer. And if they didn't, you might want to make a phone call and say, hey, Joe, I noticed you had this great plan. You met with Jamie. He's a great guy and a lot of fun. But I noticed that the property is still in your name. What's going on? Can I help you with that? And so these are things where I think are important distinctions that don't, I don't think you get a law degree over that. But I do think this could be the difference that makes a difference for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can't tell you how many folks have come to me, hey, mom and dad, they set up this great trust, and then I have to break the news to them. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's nothing we can do with this right now, right? So I've been in many situations where now I have to go to probate, um, even though the person did set up a trust, right? So
Yeah.
we got to really, really remember we can set up the trust, but it's very, very important to transfer things to that trust.
One of the other important customer service distinctions is what happens with the actual documents. Does the customer keep the only copy? I know there was a time, my father was an attorney and he had a partner who did wills and trusts. And there was a time when all attorneys kept all the documents in a vault. I remember in his law office, they had this fireproof vault, like a bank almost. And then there's a time when attorneys did not want to keep them for liability reasons. I think now with more advanced digital technologies, their attorneys they have more advanced strategies. So how do you help customers in this regard, and what is kind of your customer service approach with your practice?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, at my firm, we of course help the clients with the signing of the documents, and then we package the original documents, whether that be in one of our branded folders or a portfolio, and we turn over the originals to the clients with a flash drive of digital copies. We hold on to digital copies here in our system, and we don't charge the clients for that service, or of course, or at least we don't charge them any extra for that. Um, And basically, we instruct the clients keep your documents in a very safe place, right? So if you want to keep it at home, we encourage them to use a fireproof safe. Um, I have had clients use safe deposit boxes, but I encourage them to have more than one person on that box. Um, and I also encourage them to let their important family members or people know the existence of the plan, right? And where they might be able to get that information if ever they need to use it. But yeah, we're of course you'll find firms that'll vary, right? Some will say, "Hey, we'll hold on to the originals," but us, we turn over the originals to the client, but we do hold on to a digital copy just in case.
And there are many firms that for whatever reason won't hold on digital copies on purpose by their decision. And I can respect people's approaches, but I also, have, my customers' interests in mind. And I think I have the feelings of my customers, and I know, I know what's best for them. I think having digital copies with the attorney as well, and expecting the attorney to be able to access it, I just think that's a reasonable standard that most of my customers expect. I know there's reasons, pros and cons, and I don't mean to be in any way disrespectful, but I can just say for the people that I deal with, I think that they all expect the attorney has a copy. And if you don't meet your customers' expectations, I think you're not really delivering the highest level of service. And so those are the 2 points that I try to focus in on, actually three: the website, how do you fund and follow up on the funding, and the copies and or the originals. And like I said, I met Jamy early on and realized he hit all three of those points, and I feel very comfortable referring people with Florida needs to talk to him. Now, licensing, you're in Florida, but I think you also service a couple other states, don't you?
I do, yes. So my original state of practice is Florida, but I am also licensed to practice in Washington, D.C. and Minnesota. And last year, as of last year, we opened up satellite offices in those states.
Wow, congratulations. And so I think that's
Thank you.
important that in Florida, particularly, we have people moving, having maybe property they moved to Florida, establish a new residence, but they also have property maybe they didn't sell or their old business in your case, Minnesota or Washington, D.C., to have an attorney that's in both those areas. So I'm sure you can refer and find attorneys in other states as well, if need be, but that fact that you're admitted both those bars, I think makes it really good for your customers. Okay, well, look, I sure appreciate your time today. I know I'm coming up on the end, and because of the incredible fee you're charging me for this, I have to keep it on schedule. I'm kidding. You're very generous with your time, and I do appreciate that. In fact, let's talk about that for one split second. I appreciate you've been so generous when I've called to have you on my podcast previously in this one. Talk about how that figures into your business development. Like, why are you so generous with your time? I appreciate it, but maybe share with the other attorneys who might be listening. How has that affected you with your business or affected you with your practice overall?
Yes, well, me, I approach, so apart from practicing law, I do have the privilege of teaching as an adjunct professor, and I approach my practice as an extension of my ability to teach folks, right? Um, so being able to come to the public and share whatever information I can, I think that it hits two spots for me, right? One, I get to get additional information and clear out the weeds, so to speak, of all the misinformation that's out there. But two, I get to showcase, what I do and what services I can provide for the community. So it's truly a pleasure to get to join you and chat with you, and it's certainly my honor to do so. But I think it's just it serves the community at large, really.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's kind of the old school. My father was an old school attorney. I think that's kind of the old school mentality that you're serves the public, and as a result, you get business, and that pays the bills. But if you focus on helping people, your practice is going to flourish. And I've watched that happen with you. I know we called you when you started, and you were more of a professor, and now you're more of a practicing attorney. In fact, you're opening satellite offices all around the country. So it's been fun to watch you grow as you've helped people on my channel and other people as well. So Jimmy, thank you so much. And just again, a reminder, Barrow Legal is blegalfl for Florida.com is the website. If you go on there, you'll see a phone number, toll-free number, as well as a button you can click to get more information about him. And then obviously describes the details. He's also very active on LinkedIn, so you can find him there if you want more information. This podcast is the Estate Planning Podcast. I'm Bill Gross, at Bill Gross Probate. Feel free to join us. We release new episodes every week, but more importantly, our Facebook group. Go there with questions, referrals, different states, different realtors, attorneys in other states, as well as post your estate planning related content there. We'd love to have you there and support your business. Jamy, thank you so much. As always, it's been a pleasure, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.